I was flying to Miami on a family trip with my son and daughter-in-law, but the flight attendant suddenly whispered, "Pretend you're sick and get off the plane." I thought it was a joke, but she begged, "Please, I beg you." 20 minutes later. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you are listening in the comments. The afternoon light slanted through my study window, catching dust particles suspended in air that smelled of old paper and lemon furniture polish. I sat at my desk grading history papers I'd kept for 15 years. Nostalgia, maybe, or the stubborn hope that my teaching days still mattered. The house settled around me with its familiar creaks, and I'd almost forgotten I wasn't alone here anymore. Then I heard the front door open downstairs. I looked up, pen hovering over a student's essay about Reconstruction. Christopher and Edith had been living here for 8 months, but they moved through these rooms like ghosts, barely acknowledging my existence. We'd exchanged polite nods in the kitchen, nothing more. Their sudden footsteps on the stairs made my shoulders tense. Edith appeared first in my doorway, Christopher behind her with his hands shoved deep in his pockets. His eyes found the bookshelf, the window, anywhere but my face. "Francis, we need to talk." Edith's voice dripped with artificial sweetness, the kind that precedes bad news or worse requests. I removed my reading glasses slowly, a small defensive gesture I'd perfected over 40 years of dealing with difficult students. "About what?" Christopher shifted his weight. "We've been thinking about family, about how we should spend more time together." "Quality time," Edith added, moving into the room uninvited. She perched on the arm of my reading chair like she owned it. "Before life gets too busy." Before what exactly? I kept my voice level, but my historian's mind was already cataloging inconsistencies. They'd avoided me for months. Why this sudden change? Just, you know how it is. Edith waved her hand dismissively. "Christopher, tell him about Miami." My son finally met my eyes, and what I saw there was desperation poorly masked by forced enthusiasm. "Miami, Dad. Remember when we went when I was 12? Let's recreate those memories. A whole week together, fully paid. Our treat." I set down my pen carefully. "You hated that trip. Said it was boring, wanted to come home early." Christopher's smile faltered. "I was a kid. I see things differently now." The silence stretched. I studied them both. My son, who'd once brought me dandelions and called me his hero, and this woman who'd somehow convinced him that his elderly father was just an obstacle taking up space. Something had shifted between us, but I couldn't pinpoint when exactly. Was it when Christopher lost his job? When their debts started piling up? Or had it been gradual, a slow erosion of respect and love? "When would this trip be?" I asked. "Next week." Edith's response came too quickly. "Everything's arranged, we just need your yes." That evening, Edith insisted on cooking dinner. She never cooked. I sat at the dining room table while she moved around my kitchen with uncomfortable familiarity, opening cabinets, using my dishes. Christopher poured wine with excessive care, his hands trembling slightly when I asked about the trip's timeline. "So this was planned without consulting me?" I accepted the wine glass, watching him over the rim. "We wanted it to be a surprise," Christopher said. "A good surprise." Edith set a plate before me, her movements calculated and precise. She'd worked in medical administration for years, and that clinical efficiency showed in everything she did. "Francis, your life insurance policy is quite substantial. 500,000, right? Very responsible planning on your part." My fork stopped halfway to my mouth. "How do you know the amount?" "Christopher mentioned it once." She sat across from me, cutting her chicken into perfect uniform pieces. "Just conversation." I looked at my son. He was focused intently on his plate, refusing to meet my gaze. The mention of my insurance felt wrong, timed wrong, placed into casual dinner talk where it didn't belong. "I haven't been sleeping well lately," I said, testing them. "My heart feels strange sometimes. Flutter-like." Christopher's eyes lit up for a split second before he caught himself. "You should see a doctor. Have you seen a doctor?" "Christopher worries too much." Edith cut him off smoothly. "You look fine, Francis. Probably just stress." They locked eyes then, just for a moment, but I caught it. Something passed between them, unspoken and knowing. My chest tightened, but not from any heart condition. After dinner, while they retreated to their bedroom downstairs, I found printed flight confirmations on the table, already booked, my ticket already purchased for next Tuesday. They'd been certain I'd agree, so certain they'd made irreversible plans. I sat alone in my study long after midnight, holding an old photograph of Christopher at age 7, gap-toothed and grinning, hugging my neck like I was the safest place in the world. That boy had become this man downstairs, plotting something I couldn't quite name but felt in my bones. 40 years teaching history had taught me one thing. People leave evidence, always. Patterns emerge. Motivations become clear when you step back and observe the whole picture, not just isolated incidents. The sudden generosity, the insurance comment, those synchronized glances, the pre-purchased tickets. Morning came with pale light and the decision I'd already made in darkness. I would go to Miami. I would watch them carefully. I would gather evidence the way I'd taught my students to examine primary sources, with skepticism and attention to detail. Christopher knocked on my door at 7, his smile too bright for the early hour. "So, Dad, Miami, what do you say?" "I'll go," I told him, watching his face. Relief flooded his features, followed by something else I couldn't quite identify. Satisfaction, anticipation. "Great, that's wonderful." He gripped the doorframe. "You won't regret it." Edith appeared behind him, her nod almost imperceptible. They'd won this round, or thought they had. I spent that morning packing my suitcase with methodical care. Underwear, shirts, my medication bottles. I paused over those bottles, reading the labels as Edith's words echoed in my mind. Something about health, about my appearance, about not worrying. My hands moved almost on their own, placing the medications in my carry-on instead of the checked luggage. A small act of caution, nothing more. But my training had taught me that survival often depended on small acts, minor precautions that seemed paranoid until they saved your life. The suitcase closed with a decisive click. Miami awaited. And whatever they had planned, I'd be ready. Christopher's car smelled of stale coffee and synthetic air freshener. I sat in the passenger seat with my suitcase balanced on my lap, because he'd claimed the trunk was too full, though I'd seen it was nearly empty when he'd opened it. The weight pressed against my thighs as we merged onto the highway toward Orlando International Airport. Neither of them spoke. Christopher gripped the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles had gone pale. Edith stared out her window, phone in hand, typing rapidly and deleting messages immediately after sending them. I watched her reflection in the side mirror. Her face held that clinical blankness I'd come to recognize as her thinking expression, calculating variables and probabilities. "Excited about Miami, Dad?" Christopher's voice cracked slightly on the last word. "Should I be?" He missed the implication entirely. Of course, family time, beaches, relaxation. Right. The silence resumed, heavier now. I watched familiar Orlando streets slide past, the strip mall where I'd bought Christopher his first bicycle, the library where I'd spent countless Saturdays, the high school where I'd shaped young minds for 3 decades. Each block increased the pressure in my chest, the sense that I was being carried towards something irreversible. The airport appeared ahead, all concrete and glass and controlled chaos. Christopher parked in short term, another oddity. We'd be gone a week, yet he chose the most expensive option. Small details, but they accumulated like evidence in a case I was building against my own family. Security checkpoint arrived too quickly. Edith insisted I go through first, her hand firm on my shoulder, guiding me forward. I placed my carry-on the conveyor belt, watching her watch the screen as my belongings passed through. She leaned forward slightly, checking something, then relaxed when the bag emerged on the other side. "See? Easy," she said, but her relief seemed disproportionate to the simple act of airport security. At the gate, Christopher and Edith boarded immediately with Zone 1, while my ticket relegated me to Zone 3. They disappeared down the jetway without looking back, leaving me standing among strangers, my suitcase handle digging into my palm. When my zone was finally called, I walked slowly, aware of the finality of each step. The jetway stretched ahead, that peculiar liminal space between solid ground and metal tubes suspended in nothing. The aircraft door yawned open, recycled air washing over me, carrying that distinct airplane smell of cleaning chemicals and thousands of previous passengers. I stepped inside, searching for my seat number, when a flight attendant approached. Her name tag read Mildred, and her face held professional pleasantness until she leaned close, pretending to check my boarding pass. Pretend you're feeling ill and leave this aircraft." The words came out as an urgent whisper, her breath warm against my ear. I froze, hand tightening on my carry-on. "Excuse me? I don't understand." But she'd already moved away, tending to overhead bins and smiling at other passengers. I stood in the aisle, confused, looking between her retreating form and Christopher and Edith in their seats 3 rows ahead. They hadn't noticed the exchange, too focused on their phones. Was this a joke? Some bizarre safety protocol? I took another step toward my row when Mildred returned, her professional mask cracking. Her hands trembled as she touched my elbow. "Sir, I'm begging you. You need to get off this plane, now." I looked into her eyes then and saw genuine terror. Not concern, not confusion. Terror. The kind that comes from knowing something specific and horrible. My decades of reading students' faces, of distinguishing truth from lies, kicked in. This woman was serious. "You're serious," I said quietly. "I've never been more serious in my life." Her fingers dug into my sleeve. "Please, trust me." "Dad, everything okay?" Christopher's voice carried down the aisle, sharp with something that wasn't quite concern. I made the decision in a heartbeat, operating on pure instinct. My hand moved to my chest, fingers splaying over my shirt. My chest. The words came out strangled, convincing because the fear was real, even if the symptom was manufactured. I stumbled, dropping to one knee in the narrow aisle. The performance came naturally, aided by the genuine terror coursing through my veins. Immediate reaction. Flight crew surrounded me, voices overlapping in professional crisis mode. "Sir, can you breathe? Sir, stay with us." Hands under my arms, lifting, supporting. A wheelchair was called. I let them help me, but kept my eyes sharp, observant. The sick old man act didn't extend to my awareness. Through the commotion, I caught Christopher and Edith's faces. That's what I remember most clearly. Not concern, not worry, but disappointment. Pure, undisguised disappointment before their masks slammed back into place and they performed concern for the audience around them. Christopher stood from his seat, the movement aggressive before he softened it, making himself the worried son. "Dad, what's wrong? Should we come with you?" No, stay seated, everyone." A crew member blocked the aisle. "We'll take care of him. Medical personnel are standing by." As they wheeled me backward down the jetway, I heard Edith's voice, low and meant only for Christopher, but carrying just enough in the quiet after crisis. "This ruins everything." Christopher's hissed response, "Not here, not now." The wheelchair carried me back through the jetway, back into the terminal, back to solid ground. My phone buzzed in my pocket as they settled me in the medical area. A text from Christopher. "Dad, hope you feel better. We'll call when we land." I watched through the window as the aircraft pushed back from the gate, as it began its slow taxi toward the runway. Christopher and Edith were aboard that plane, growing smaller and more distant with each passing second. The physical separation felt absolute, like I'd crossed some invisible threshold and could never return to the innocence of not knowing. The plane disappeared from view, just another metal speck against blue sky. "Mr. Wilson?" I turned. Mildred stood there, still in her uniform but off duty now, her face pale and drawn. She glanced around the medical area, checking for listeners. "We need to talk," she said, her voice tight with urgency. "Now, somewhere private." The medical room was small and windowless, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead with that persistent electrical hum that sets teeth on edge. A paramedic had just cleared me. Vitals are fine, probably anxiety, and left me alone on the examination table, paper crinkling beneath me every time I shifted. Through the narrow window in the door, I could see the tail of my flight disappearing into clouds, carrying my son and daughter-in-law toward Miami, while I sat here in this sterile room, heart pounding for reasons that had nothing to do with medical issues. My phone buzzed. Christopher's third text. "Dad, please respond. We're worried sick." I powered it off. The door opened. Mildred entered, still in her uniform, but her professional composure had cracked like old porcelain. She closed the door firmly, checked the hallway through the window once, then turned to face me. Her hands shook. "I need to show you something." Her voice trembled. "What I'm about to do could cost me my job, but I can't let this happen." I straightened on the table, paper rustling. "Show me." She pulled out her phone with fingers that couldn't quite stay steady, unlocked it, navigated to her video library. I recorded part of her phone call, in the restroom, before boarding. She paused, meeting my eyes. Your daughter-in-law's call. The phone screen showed a bathroom stall, mostly ceiling tiles and fluorescent lighting. The audio was muffled, but voices carried through the echo of tile and porcelain. Edith's voice unmistakable in its clinical precision. The pills will dissolve quickly in his drink. He won't taste anything. A pause. Altitude makes heart attacks more plausible. Emergency at 30,000 feet. Medical response limited. Investigation harder. Another pause, then. 500,000. Christopher's nervous, but committed. She laughed. Actually laughed. I watched the video once, twice, 3 times. Each viewing revealed new layers of horror. My daughter-in-law discussing my death like a business transaction, weighing logistics and timing, calculating profit margins on my life. Who was she talking to? My voice came out steady, surprisingly so. I don't know. Mildred lowered the phone. But she mentioned the plan being in motion and Christopher being on board. Those were her exact words. I looked at her directly. Why did you do this? Risk your career for a stranger? Something flickered across her face. Old pain, barely healed wounds. My father, 3 years ago. His nephew convinced him to change his will, then he fell downstairs. They ruled it an accident. Her jaw tightened. I couldn't prove anything. The regret has eaten at me ever since. When I heard that conversation, heard her plotting, I couldn't stay silent again. I'm sorry about your father. Don't be sorry. Her voice hardened. Stop them. I took her contact information in my small notebook, the one I always carried out of teacher habit, precise, careful letters. Even in crisis, documentation instinct prevailed. We exchanged phone numbers. She promised to preserve the recording, understood it might become legal evidence. We shook hands. Her grip was firm despite the trembling, and she left to catch her next flight rotation. The taxi ride home took 40 minutes through Orlando's suburbs, past strip malls and chain restaurants and residential developments that all looked identical. The driver tried making conversation. Missed your flight? No. I stared out the window. I caught something more important. He fell silent, confused, but sensing I didn't want to elaborate. My house appeared ahead, 2-story colonial with the garden I'd maintained for 30 years. Christopher's car wasn't in the driveway. They were in Miami, wondering why their plan had failed, scrambling to adjust. I paid the driver, walked up the path, unlocked my own front door. The house felt different now, violated. Knowing what had been plotted within these walls, discussed at my own dining table, planned in bedrooms down the hall, I set my carry-on by the stairs and went straight to my study. The filing cabinet held decades of documentation, insurance policies, bank statements, legal papers, property deeds. I spread everything across the dining room table, creating a systematic layout, chronological order, categorized by type, teacher's methodology applied to my own survival. Hours passed. The light outside faded to dusk, then darkness. I put on my reading glasses, examined each document under good lighting, looking for inconsistencies, signs of tampering, evidence of the conspiracy Mildred had exposed. I found it. The life insurance beneficiary form, dated 6 months ago, changing primary beneficiary from my niece in Atlanta to Christopher Wilson. The signature at the bottom attempted to mimic my handwriting, but failed. The capital F in Francis was wrong, too elaborate. I never made that flourish. I photographed the document with my phone, evidence preservation. More digging revealed additional horrors. Bank account statements showing transfers I'd never authorized. $38,000 over 6 months. Siphoned in amounts small enough to escape casual notice. A power of attorney document, granting Christopher financial authority, signed with my forged name. Medical records I'd never seen. Documenting cognitive decline I'd never experienced. They'd been building a paper trail of my incompetence while I taught night classes at the community center, graded papers, lived my normal life. Creating the fiction of a failing mind to justify their control, to explain away my death as natural consequence of deteriorating health. Evidence, timeline, motive, method. I spoke aloud to the empty room, old teaching habit resurfacing. They planned this for months, living in my house, eating my food, plotting my murder. I held up the forged power of attorney, staring at the signature that wasn't mine. This wasn't impulsive. This was systematic, planned, sophisticated. They'd researched, prepared, established legal groundwork for theft and murder, both. The documents remained spread across my dining table. I didn't clean them up, couldn't. They represented physical proof of betrayal, tangible evidence of how thoroughly I'd been deceived. I sat in my reading chair as midnight approached, the house silent around me. My son was in Miami, probably reassuring Edith that they'd find another opportunity, another method. They didn't know I had the recording, didn't know I'd found their forged documents, didn't know the prey had become aware of the hunters. My hands rested on the chair arms, steady now. The shock had burned away, replaced by something colder, more focused. They didn't just try to kill me. They'd been stealing my life piece by piece for months, erasing my autonomy, building toward my erasure. Time to take it back. 3 days had passed since I'd discovered the forged documents. 3 days of avoiding Christopher and Edith's concerned questions, deflecting their attention with vague mentions of stomach trouble from the airport incident. 3 days of research, reading attorney reviews, making discreet calls, organizing evidence into color-coded folders that now sat on my desk in neat stacks. Nicholas Clark arrived precisely at 2 o'clock, as scheduled. Mid-50s, gray threading through his dark hair, expensive briefcase that spoke of successful practice. A state law specialist with 20 years' experience. His handshake was firm, his eyes sharp and assessing. "Mr. Wilson, thank you for trusting me with this." He settled into the chair across from my desk, opened his briefcase, pulled out a laptop and legal pad. "Walk me through what you've found." I slid the first folder across the desk. Blue tab, financial documents. Nicholas's professional composure held through the first few pages, then began cracking as the scope revealed itself. Forged signatures, altered beneficiaries, fraudulent power of attorney. His fingers moved faster, flipping pages, cross-referencing dates, building timeline. "When did you last review these documents personally?" His pen hovered over legal pad. "The insurance policy, 5 years ago when I retired from teaching. And you never authorized any beneficiary changes." "Never." My voice was steady, firm. "That policy was meant for my niece in Atlanta. She put herself through nursing school. I wanted her to have something." Nicholas made notes, his writing quick and precise. "Your daughter-in-law, Edith Wilson. What's her professional background?" "Medical administrator, Silver Palms Medical Center. Administrative access to patient records, document templates, physician's signature stamps." Understanding dawned in his eyes. "She created your medical history, made you incompetent on paper, while I was teaching night classes at the community center twice a week." I almost smiled at the irony. Lecturing on civil rights history while being declared cognitively declined in fraudulent medical reports. Nicholas opened his laptop, began running forensic accounting software on my bank records. I'd provided account access authorization earlier. Red flags appeared immediately on the screen, highlighted in crimson. Unauthorized transfers, signature discrepancies, pattern matching typical fraud indicators. His expression grew grimmer with each discovery. 38,000 over 6 months, he said quietly. Systematic theft, small amounts initially, then growing bolder. Classic embezzlement pattern. I reached into my desk drawer, pulled out Christopher's laptop. He left this in his room. I know his passwords, set up the computer for him years ago. He never changed them. Nicholas glanced up, something flickering in his expression. Understanding, perhaps, of the ethical line I'd crossed. But he took the laptop, connected an external drive, began data recovery procedures. Within minutes, deleted emails resurrected themselves on the screen. The conspiracy unfolded in digital form. Email chains between Christopher and someone calling himself a medical consultant. Discussion of substances causing heart failure, untraceable in standard autopsy, particularly effective at high altitude. Prices negotiated. $10,000 for consultation and supply. Meeting arranged at a parking garage in downtown Orlando. Nicholas's jaw tightened as he read. "This is a murder contract. Your son negotiated your death like he was buying a used car." The words should have hurt more than they did, but I'd burned through pain during those 3 days of documentation, reached a colder place beyond conventional grief. "Keep reading," I said. There's more. He found the draft will on Christopher's desktop. Everything left to Christopher and Edith Wilson. My signature forged at the bottom, dated 2 weeks ago. They'd planned to discover it after my death, present it to probate court, claim I'd changed my mind about my niece. Nicholas leaned back, removed his glasses, rubbed his eyes. When he looked at me again, his professional mask had dropped entirely. Francis, may I call you Francis? I nodded. This goes beyond estate fraud. This is conspiracy to commit murder, forgery, elder abuse, financial exploitation. Criminal charges, not just civil recovery. He paused. We need to decide, bring in police now, or build an ironclad case first. My phone buzzed on the desk between us. Christopher's text lit up the screen. Dad, where are you? We need to talk about your health. Nicholas glanced at the phone, then at me. Understanding passed between us wordlessly. The manipulation continued even now. Pressure applied to keep me confused and compliant. Build the case first, I said. Make it undeniable. Then we strike. He nodded slowly, respect evident in his expression. You've thought about this. I taught strategy through history for 40 years. Sun Tzu, Machiavelli, Napoleon. I learned from the best. I met his eyes. Know your enemy. Choose your battlefield. They're going to realize you know, Nicholas warned. When I file protective orders, block accounts, revoke fraudulent documents, they'll know. Good. My hands rested flat on the desk, steady and calm. Let them panic. Panicked people make mistakes. A slight smile crossed his face. All right then, here's what we do. He spent the next hour outlining strategy, calls to contacts, document examiner for signature analysis, forensic accountant for detailed audit, private investigator for background on the medical consultant. He photographed evidence with high-resolution camera, created digital backups, uploaded everything to encrypted cloud storage. 3 evidence packets, he explained, printing documents and organizing them into folders. 1 for eventual police involvement, 1 for civil proceedings, 1 for you to keep secure off-site, safe deposit box, not your house. I nodded, absorbing everything. Student mode engaged, learning the machinery of legal warfare. As afternoon faded toward evening, Nicholas gathered his materials, packed his briefcase with methodical care. At my study door, he paused and turned back. Francis, 1 question. When this is over, what do you want? Justice or revenge? I didn't hesitate. I want them to understand what they've done. I want consequences that last. He considered this, then nodded. Don't change anything yet. Act normal. I'll handle protective orders, account freezes through legal channels. Give me 1 week. After he left, I sat in the darkening study, listening to the house settle around me. My phone buzzed again. Christopher. Dad, dinner tonight? We need to talk about your future. I stared at the text, then typed my response. Yes, we need to talk about the future. The double meaning was clear to me, opaque to him. The hunter had become the hunted, though he didn't know it yet. I pressed send. 1 week had passed since Nicholas Clark left my study with his briefcase full of evidence and his timeline for legal strikes. 7 days of performance, of playing the confused old man while executing strategy with the precision I'd once applied to lesson planning. I sat at my breakfast table, coffee growing cold in its mug, watching Christopher and Edith through the kitchen doorway. They'd just returned from work, Christopher's tie loosened, Edith's professional mask firmly in place. Neither of them knew that, while I'd shuffled around the house asking which pills to take and where I'd left my reading glasses, I'd been methodically destroying the foundation of their conspiracy. Dad? Christopher appeared in the doorway. You okay? You've been staring at that coffee for 10 minutes. I blinked slowly, perfecting the vacant look. Have I? I was just thinking about something. What was I thinking about? I shook my head, confused. It's gone now. The glance they exchanged was triumphant. I watched it happen, watched them see what they wanted to see. Deterioration, decline, the mental incompetence their forged documents claimed. What they didn't see was the security camera above the refrigerator recording every micro-expression, every satisfied smirk. The cameras had been installed 3 days ago, 12 of them throughout the house. I'd called a legitimate security company, explained I'd been forgetting to lock doors and worried about break-ins. Christopher and Edith had approved enthusiastically. "For your safety, Dad," Christopher had said. "That's really smart thinking." They hadn't examined the specifications closely, hadn't realized the cameras recorded audio, hadn't understood that every private conversation, every whispered plan, every moment they thought themselves alone was being captured and uploaded to cloud storage that only I could access. The technician had been thorough. 24/7 recording, sir. Complete coverage. Even sound. Even sound? I'd repeated, playing up the elderly confusion. "Audio on all cameras, yes, sir. Crystal clear." Christopher had interjected then, concern crossing his face. "Dad, isn't that expensive?" "My safety is worth it." I'd waved dismissively. "I've been so forgetful lately. Can't be too careful." That night, I'd added my own enhancement, a small audio recorder tucked into the heating vent above the dining room, the same spot where I'd once caught students cheating during exams, placing a microphone to record their whispered answers. Old teacher trick, new application. The recorder had paid dividends immediately. Christopher and Edith had their most candid conversations late at night in that room, believing themselves private. I'd listened through my headphones, documenting everything. "The plane was supposed to work," Edith had hissed 2 nights ago, frustration cutting through her usual control. "Now we're back to square one." "You said the pills were undetectable," Christopher had shot back. I said a lot of things. Now we need plan B, the incompetency route. What if he resists?" "He won't. Look at him lately. He's already halfway there." I'd recorded it all, my face expressionless in the darkness of my room above them. Evidence accumulating, digital, and damning. But the most dangerous work happened in the deep hours when Christopher slept. His laptop lived on his desk, often left open or barely closed. I'd learned enough from teaching digital literacy classes to navigate file systems, copy drives, recover deleted data. The external hard drive I'd purchased stayed hidden in my study, filling with evidence each night I dared to enter his room. The close call had come 2 nights ago. Progress bar at 88%, my fingers hovering over the disconnect button when I'd heard footsteps in the hallway. I'd yanked the drive free, pocketed it, slipped through the bathroom that connected Christopher's room to the main hallway. My heart had hammered against my ribs, but my hands had remained steady. Decades of maintaining composure in front of challenging students had trained me well. Nicholas and I had met that afternoon in his office, reviewing the copied files, email chains about obtaining substances, browser history researching untraceable poisons, spreadsheet calculations of my net worth, insurance payouts, asset liquidation timelines. Premeditation, Nicholas had said, his voice flat with professional assessment. Not impulsive acts, systematic planning over months. "Good," I'd replied. "I want them to understand this isn't simple fraud. This is attempted murder." The legal machinery had already begun moving. Nicholas had filed protective orders, account freezes, power of attorney revocations, all with carefully delayed notification dates. Christopher and Edith wouldn't discover the blocks until they next attempted transfers. "They won't know until they try to access funds," Nicholas had explained. Then panic. Panicked people make exploitable mistakes. Yesterday, I'd completed the most important task, creating a legitimate new will. Florence Harris, the notary, had been thorough to the point of redundancy. She'd read the entire document aloud, confirmed I understood each provision, recorded a video statement of my intentions. "Your son won't inherit?" she'd asked directly, her experienced eyes searching my face. "My son plotted to murder me for inheritance," I'd replied, clear-eyed and certain. "He'll get exactly what he deserves. Nothing. Everything goes to the Educational Futures Foundation. Scholarships for students who actually value education." She'd nodded, adding extra documentation layers, fingerprints, capacity assessment, multiple witnesses. "I've seen this pattern before," she'd said quietly. "Family members who see elderly relatives as obstacles rather than people. Now, sitting at my breakfast table, performing confusion over which pills to take, I felt the trap tightening around them. Edith approached, her voice dripping false concern. "The blue pills, Francis, for your heart. Here, let me help." "Thank you, dear." I accepted the pills gratefully, swallowed them while she watched. "I don't know what I'd do without you both." The camera above us recorded her satisfied expression, Christopher's approving nod from the doorway. Evidence of their performance, their manipulation, their growing confidence that I was exactly as incompetent as their fraudulent documents claimed. That evening, Nicholas had handed me a burner phone in a parking garage. Neutral location, no cameras, no witnesses. If emergency, he'd said. If they escalate to physical danger, call this number. Police are briefed, ready to respond immediately. I'd pocketed it, hoping I wouldn't need it, knowing I might. Late that night, I sat in my study reviewing footage from the day's cameras. On screen, Christopher and Edith in the living room, their voices clear through the audio feed. "We need power of attorney for his medical decisions," Edith was saying. "Find a doctor who'll declare him incompetent. Then we control everything: finances, healthcare, end-of-life decisions." Christopher's face showed no remorse, only calculation. My son had become someone I didn't recognize, or perhaps someone I'd refused to see clearly until survival demanded honest vision. I closed the laptop, picked up my phone, dialed Nicholas's number. "They're accelerating," I said when he answered. "Moving toward forced incompetency evaluation. We need to trigger the account freeze now." "Agreed," Nicholas replied. "I'll activate tomorrow morning." Be ready for their reaction. After hanging up, I opened my old teaching journal, leather-bound, pages filled with decades of classroom observations and educational philosophy. I wrote carefully, "Lesson for today, Sun Tzu was right. The supreme art of war is to subdue the enemy without fighting, but sometimes you must let them destroy themselves. Tomorrow, they discover what happens when you underestimate the teacher." I closed the journal and went to bed, sleeping soundly for the first time in weeks. Morning arrived with pale sunlight and the sound of Christopher's computer chiming upstairs. Incoming email. I sat at the breakfast table, newspaper spread before me like a prop, listening intently to the house, sounds I'd learned over 40 years of living here. Footsteps, rapid. Christopher's voice, sharp with alarm. "Edith, get up here, now!" I sipped my coffee slowly, counting to 60 in my head. Teacher habit. Wait before reacting. Let the situation develop. Upstairs, urgent voices overlapped, words indistinct but tone unmistakable. Panic. At 60, I called up the stairs. "Everything all right?" Silence, then Christopher's forced calm. "Fine, Dad. Just work stuff." The lie was obvious to everyone. I returned to my newspaper, not reading, just waiting. Throughout the morning, Christopher attempted to access accounts from his home computer. I observed from the hallway, unnoticed. Phone camera recording as error messages multiplied on his screen. Access denied, account locked. Please visit branch in person. His fingers trembled on the keyboard, trying different passwords, different access routes. Each attempt failed. Edith watched over his shoulder, her jaw tight. "Call the bank." He did. I heard his side of the conversation, increasingly desperate explanations about power of attorney, account management agreements, legal authorization. The bank's response must have been unequivocal because Christopher's face went ashen. "They say the account holder must appear in person," he said flatly. "All third-party authorizations suspended pending fraud investigation." For lunch, I made sandwiches, unusual behavior that neither commented on, too absorbed in their crisis. They ate mechanically, phones out, texting people I couldn't identify. Lawyers, probably. Or the mysterious medical consultant from the email chains I'd copied. Dinner, I decided, required something special. I spent the afternoon in the kitchen preparing pot roast the way I'd learned decades ago. Muscle memory from years of cooking for myself after retirement, from the life I'd built that they intended to erase for profit. When they arrived home that evening, I heard them whispering urgently in the hallway before entering. I called them to the table, served food with practiced ease. The domesticity made the conversation more surreal. "Strange thing happened today," I said conversationally, cutting meat into precise pieces. "Bank called about unusual activity on my accounts. Apparently someone's been making unauthorized transfers." I looked up, met their eyes. I asked them to investigate thoroughly. Christopher choked slightly on his water. Edith's fork paused mid-air, trembling almost imperceptibly before she forced herself to continue eating. "Dad," Christopher began, "about that, if you were just helping me manage money like you said," I interrupted gently, "the bank will sort it out, unless—" I let the pause extend. "There's something you need to tell me?" Edith's mask slipped, her voice sharpened, professional control cracking at the edges. Francis, you're clearly confused about your finances. This is exactly why you need our help. Why you need oversight. Oversight. I repeated the word slowly. Interesting choice. Legal oversight, she pushed harder. Medical oversight, for your own protection. Protection from what? I asked mildly. From whom? The silence that followed was its own answer. Christopher stared at his plate. Edith's knuckles whitened around her fork. My phone rang. Nicholas as planned. I answered, keeping my expression neutral. Oh, the bank? Yes, I'll come by tomorrow. Investigation? Of course, whatever's needed to protect my accounts. I watched their faces drain of color as I spoke. Unauthorized access is a serious matter. I appreciate them taking it seriously. After dinner, Christopher approached as I washed dishes. Dad, about tomorrow, maybe I should go with you, help explain the account management we've been doing. I smiled gently, drying a plate with methodical care. That's thoughtful, but I should handle my own finances. I'm not incompetent yet. The word hung in the air. Incompetent. Christopher froze, searching my face. Had I emphasized it deliberately? Did I know about their plans? How much did I understand? I turned back to the dishes, leaving him suspended in uncertainty. Late that night, I lay awake in my bedroom, phone on the nightstand displaying the security feed. Christopher and Edith sat in the living room below, their argument clear through the audio. This is your fault, Edith's voice cut like surgical steel. Your sloppy forgeries, your weak stomach for the original plan. The power of attorney was perfect, Christopher started. Obviously not, since we're locked out of everything. She stood, pacing. The camera followed her movement. We moved to Plan B immediately. Incompetency evaluation. I know people at Silver Palms who need money, who owe favors. We get him declared unfit, become his guardians, control everything, including whether this investigation continues. What doctor would cooperate? Not cooperate. Interpret findings favorably. There's a difference. Her voice dropped, became calculating. I'll arrange it tomorrow. I recorded everything, timestamps preserved, evidence accumulating like compound interest. Slow at first, then exponentially damning. Morning brought the promised phone call. Dr. Morrison claimed to be my family physician, which was interesting since I didn't have a family physician. I used the walk-in clinic near the library for occasional needs. Routine cognitive assessment, the pleasant voice explained. Just a standard evaluation. This afternoon at 2? Of course, I agreed warmly. I appreciate the thorough care. After hanging up, I immediately called Nicholas. They're moving. Medical evaluation to declare incompetency. Dr. Morrison, supposedly my physician. Morrison? A pause while he checked. No medical license in Florida under that name. It's fake. So they're using a fake doctor to declare me incompetent. Attempted fraud on top of everything else. Nicholas's voice held grim satisfaction. Francis, keep the appointment. Record everything. I've arranged independent psychiatric evaluation for you tomorrow morning. Dr. Patricia Chen, 30 years experience, impeccable credentials. Their fake diagnosis versus real professional assessment. We'll destroy them in court. That afternoon, I drove to the address provided, shared medical building, multiple practices. I checked the directory in the lobby. No Dr. Morrison listed. The office number given led to a small suite with temporary signage, the kind you can print and tape up overnight. I sat in my car for a moment, phone recording device active in my shirt pocket. Nicholas had texted, "Police on standby if threatened?" I responded, "Everything ready. Let's see how far they'll go." For 40 years, I'd taught students to distinguish truth from manipulation, evidence from assumption, reality from performance. Today I got to demonstrate those lessons in real time. Christopher and Edith had arranged this test thinking I'd fail. They had no idea I'd been preparing my entire professional life for exactly this kind of challenge. I opened the car door and walked toward the building, steady and certain. Dr. Patricia Chen's office smelled of leather furniture and subtle lavender. I sat across from her, completing the final cognitive assessment, pattern recognition puzzles that would have challenged my students, memory questions I answered with dates and details, executive function tests I navigated systematically. Her sharp eyes watched everything. 3 decades of forensic psychiatry, evident in how she observed not just answers, but approach, methodology, reasoning. Fully competent, she said finally, setting down her pen. No cognitive decline, analytical skills above age group average, no indicators of paranoia or delusion. Frankly, Mr. Wilson, your mental acuity rivals people half your age. I thanked her, accepted the preliminary documentation, and drove home satisfied. The fake Dr. Morrison appointment from yesterday had been exactly what I'd expected. Shabby office with temporary signage, someone claiming credentials they didn't possess. Questions designed to create appearance of incompetency regardless of answers. I'd recorded everything. Now I had the contrast. Fraudulent evaluation versus legitimate professional assessment. But as I pulled into my driveway, satisfaction evaporated. Christopher's car blocked the entrance. My son stood on the porch, envelope in hand. His face set with desperate determination I recognized from students who'd cheated and been caught but were trying one final bluff. He approached my car window before I could exit. His hand shook slightly as he thrust the envelope forward. "Dad, this is for your own good. You're not well. We need to protect you." I took the papers, read them thoroughly. Petition for guardianship due to incapacity. The allegations were detailed and damning. Paranoid delusions regarding family members, progressive memory loss, financial incompetence, danger to self due to unstable behavior. Supporting documentation attached, sworn statements from witnesses, medical reports, incident logs. I read every word while Christopher shifted his weight, unable to meet my eyes. "Whose safety, Christopher?" I asked quietly. "Mine or yours?" He fled to his car without answering. Nicholas arrived within an hour of my call. We spread the court documents across my dining room table, the same table where I'd first organized evidence months ago. His professional calm cracked as he read. "They're claiming you're incompetent after attempted murder failed?" He flipped through pages. The audacity of this, these witness statements, these medical reports. "Desperation breeds boldness," I said. "Read the witness list." Mrs. Patterson from next door claimed she'd seen me wandering the yard in pajamas at midnight. Tom Chen from book club noticed increasing confusion during discussions. Dr. Sarah Williams from Silver Palms Medical provided detailed psychiatric evaluation showing progressive dementia. "You never met Dr. Williams," Nicholas said. "Never. But her credentials are real. Edith arranged this through her medical connections." I pointed to another statement. "And these neighbors, I need to talk to them." That evening I walked door to door, teaching journal in hand. Most neighbors were embarrassed, ashamed. Mrs. Patterson's voice trembled. "Christopher said it was just to help with your care, that you'd approved it. I didn't realize it was for court." "What exactly did you see, Margaret?" "You, outside at night, by the bushes, in your pajamas." "I was checking security cameras I'd installed. At 11 p.m., not midnight, in shorts and t-shirt, not pajamas." I kept my voice gentle, teacher comforting confused student. "Christopher showed you what he wanted you to see." She broke down crying, promised to recant. 2 other neighbors had similar stories: manipulation, context removed, innocent behavior twisted. But 3 neighbors refused to speak with me. I learned later Christopher had paid them, $500 here, $300 there, small amounts to people struggling financially, enough to buy false testimony. The preliminary hearing came 2 weeks later. I sat beside Nicholas, posture straight, taking organized notes, visible demonstration of competency. Christopher and Edith sat across the aisle with their attorney, expensive suit and calculated confidence. Where had Christopher found money for lawyers like this? More debt probably, digging deeper holes. Judge Thompson reviewed both sides' filings with evident skepticism. Court-appointed psychiatric evaluation ordered. Dr. Patricia Chen will conduct assessment and report findings. Nicholas and I exchanged subtle glances. She'd already evaluated me, knew I was competent. The trap was working perfectly. After the hearing, Nicholas wanted immediate action. "We file criminal charges now. Everything we have, attempted murder, fraud, forgery, we can end this." I shook my head. "If we file now, they'll know we have everything. They'll lawyer up completely, maybe flee. I want them to keep digging. Let them think they're winning." "Francis, that's risky." "I taught for 40 years, James. Students reveal most when they think they're succeeding. Right now, Christopher and Edith believe their guardianship petition might work. Let them invest more in that belief. Let them commit more crimes trying to support it. Then we bury them completely. He objected. Professional instinct demanded immediate prosecution, but respected my decision. Client autonomy, even when the client was choosing the difficult path. That evening, I visited the bank, requested complete audit trail of all account activities for the past year. The manager, sympathetic now that investigation had revealed fraud attempts, provided comprehensive records. I spent hours with a highlighter, marking every unauthorized transaction. Visual timeline of theft. Evidence for prosecution. Several weeks passed. Christopher's behavior grew more erratic as his gambling debts became collection threats. I learned this through Nicholas's investigation. $75,000 owed across 3 sources: online sports betting, local card games, casino markers, threatening messages and recovered deleted emails. Timeline showed debt accumulation had accelerated 6 months before the murder plot began. Motive, clear as classroom chalk on blackboard. My phone rang late one evening. Nicholas. Court-appointed evaluation scheduled. Dr. Chen will conduct it next week. Also, Christopher's gambling situation is worse than we thought. Those debts are why he's desperate. Bookmakers don't accept apologies. I absorbed the information, made notes in my growing case files. Everything organized into labeled folders: financial fraud, forged documents, attempted murder, false medical claims, witness tampering, every piece of evidence cross-referenced, timeline visualized. I stood in my study, looking at the wall where I'd assembled everything. Photos, documents, dates connected with string like detective boards in movies. Except this was real, and the conspiracy led to my son and his wife. 40 years I'd taught students that truth requires patience. Evidence must be overwhelming. Presentation must be irrefutable. Christopher and Edith had given me months to build this case while they thought they were winning. Now they'd learned the final lesson. The teacher always knows more than the students realize. Class was almost over. Time for final exam. Dr. Patricia Chen's court-appointed evaluation report sat on Nicholas's conference table between us. I read the conclusion for the second time, savoring each word. Subject demonstrates full cognitive capacity, no evidence of dementia or incompetency, analytical skills above age group average, no indicators of paranoia or delusion. Recommendation: petition for guardianship be denied. Nicholas spread additional documents across the table, months of evidence compilation, organized into devastating presentation. 3-ring binders, color-coded tabs, chronological timeline poster, exhibits numbered and cross-referenced. Teacher recognized fellow educators' methodology. This was curriculum of crimes, comprehensive and irrefutable. We file today, Nicholas stated, not question. Statement. I nodded once. Everything, all of it. The countersuit was 47 pages detailing 18 separate criminal acts. Attempted murder, conspiracy to commit fraud, multiple counts of forgery, elder financial abuse, witness tampering, obstruction of justice. The criminal complaint ran 23 pages. Evidence exhibits filled 2 boxes. Nicholas and his paralegal delivered everything to the courthouse clerk. I watched from nearby bench as the clerk processed paperwork, paused, read further, then called her supervisor. The supervisor read, face growing serious, then picked up the phone to judge's chambers. Within hours, emergency hearings scheduled. The system recognized severity immediately. That afternoon, professional process server went to my house, where Christopher and Edith still lived because I'd never formally evicted them. Strategic decision to keep them close, monitored. I sat in my car across the street, phone recording, watching. The server rang the doorbell. Edith answered. He handed her the envelope, identified himself officially. I zoomed my camera, captured her face as she read the first page. Shock, recognition, fear. The progression took seconds. She called for Christopher. Their argument was visible through the window even from my distance. The process server's official report, later entered as evidence, documented everything. Subject Edith Wilson opened door at 2:17 p.m., served papers. She read first page, face drained of color. Quote, "This can't be, he didn't, how did?" Subject called for Christopher Wilson. Quote from Edith Wilson, "You said he was too old to figure it out." You promised. She stopped speaking when she noticed me. That evening, my security cameras captured their panic. Christopher at his computer, frantically deleting files, emptying recycle bins, attempting hard drive wipes. Edith shredding documents until the machine overheated and jammed. She kicked it, then continued tearing papers manually. Nicholas had remote access to the camera feeds. I'd granted him viewing rights weeks ago. He called me, grim satisfaction in his voice. They're destroying evidence. Every deletion is another charge. Obstruction of justice, consciousness of guilt. They're creating new crimes trying to hide old ones. Are you documenting everything? I asked. Every frame, time-stamped, backed up to encrypted servers. Even if they destroy every physical piece, we have digital archive that's untouchable. The next morning, their attorney requested emergency meeting with Nicholas. The settlement offer came quickly. Christopher and Edith would return the $38,000, vacate the property immediately, relinquish all inheritance claims, accept permanent restraining order. In exchange, I'd drop criminal charges. Nicholas brought the offer to my house. We sat in the dining room where this had all begun, where I'd first spread evidence and understood the scope of betrayal. I read the settlement terms slowly, then looked at Nicholas. They want to walk away, pay back stolen money, promise to behave, and face no consequences for trying to kill me. That's the offer. I tore the paper in half, then quarters, then smaller pieces. Let them fall onto the table like snow. They tried to murder me, James. Not steal from me, murder me. Edith researched undetectable poisons. Christopher negotiated my death price. They planned it for months while living in my house, eating my food, pretending concern. Trial is unpredictable. I taught for 40 years. Students who cheated, who lied, who thought they were clever, they never learned from easy forgiveness. Only consequences taught real lessons. I met his eyes. Christopher and Edith need that lesson. Schedule trial, public trial. I want jury verdict. I want public record. I want justice, not convenience. Nicholas collected the torn pieces, added them to evidence file, documentation of settlement rejection. Proof I wanted full accountability. Mildred called that evening after learning about the trial. I heard you're using my recording, that you're taking them to court. Your evidence is central, I confirmed. Are you comfortable testifying publicly? Absolutely. Her voice was firm, certain. What they tried to do, my father didn't get justice. Maybe through your case, his memory gets some. I'll testify. I'll tell everything I heard. Thank you. You saved my life. Now help me save others from them. Over the following days, Christopher's world unraveled visibly. His gambling debts became public as bookmakers filed their own claims. Collection agencies called constantly. I heard the phones through the walls, through the house I knew intimately. Edith and Christopher's arguments grew more vicious, blame shifting constantly. The prosecutor's office assigned the case to their senior team. Nicholas relayed their assessment. One of the clearest elder abuse cases they had seen. Evidence overwhelming, conviction highly probable. Trial date set for late August. I stood in my study that evening, looking at the wall where I'd created visual timeline of the conspiracy. Photos, documents, dates connected by string. Months of evidence displayed, patterns clear, guilt undeniable. I removed one photo from the board. Old picture of Christopher at 8 years old. Smiling, gap-toothed, innocent. The boy who'd once called me his hero, who'd brought me dandelions and construction paper cards on Father's Day. I held that photo, allowed myself one moment of grief for the son who could have been, should have been, never was. Then I placed it in my desk drawer and closed it firmly. I raised you better than this, I said to the empty room. You chose differently. Now we both live with consequences. I turned off the study light, walked out. Tomorrow brought preparation for trial. Tonight, I allowed myself to mourn the relationship that had died long before the murder plot began. The boy in that photo was gone. The man who tried to kill me would face justice. 3 weeks had passed since I rejected their settlement offer. The house felt different now, lighter, cleaner, like pressure released from a sealed container. Christopher and Edith had moved out 2 days ago, following formal eviction order. And I walked through spaces they had occupied, noting what they'd left behind in their hasty departure. Unpaid bills scattered across the bedroom floor, broken picture frames, clothing abandoned in closets. Christopher's childhood baseball trophy, ironically, awarded for sportsmanship. Edith's medical textbooks, tools of a profession she'd lost. Their wedding album, documenting a union now fracturing. I photographed everything, not vindictively, just documentarily. Teacher's instinct. Preserve records, maintain evidence. My phone buzzed. Nicholas. Christopher's car was repossessed this morning. Bookmakers are filing liens. Their apartment lease required 3 months up front. They borrowed from Edith's sister. Everything's collapsing. I read the message twice, felt no satisfaction. Just inevitable progression of consequences. The gambling debts, now public through court filings, had triggered aggressive collection. Bookmakers discovered Christopher wouldn't inherit my estate. My new will, filed publicly, showed charitable donation instead. They escalated, threatening calls, workplace visits, public confrontations. $18,000 still owed on the repossessed car. Credit cards maxed. Bank accounts garnished. Christopher tried borrowing from friends, family, anyone. Most refused, having learned the truth. His desperation became neighborhood gossip. Edith's professional destruction paralleled their financial ruin. Silver Palms Medical Center's investigation revealed her data breaches, accessing patient records without authorization, creating false medical documents, sharing confidential information. Florida Medical Board opened disciplinary case. The clinic terminated her employment immediately, flagged her credentials. Future healthcare employment virtually impossible. 15 years of career building ended in a 15-minute meeting. Security escort walked her out. Confiscated badge and keys. Former colleagues watched, whispered. She drove to their apartment, sat in the car for an hour before facing Christopher. Their new apartment was in a declining neighborhood, all they could afford now. The contrast with my comfortable home became daily reminder of their choices. Through thin walls, neighbors heard their arguments escalate. "This is your fault," Edith's voice carried through walls late one night. "Your gambling, your debts, your weakness." My weakness? Christopher's response was defensive, desperate. "You wanted him dead. I wanted money. You wanted murder. And now we have nothing. No money, no house, no future. We have each other." Edith's bitter laugh. "That's the worst part." Neighbors documented these fights, discussed them next morning. News spread. Community judgment was harsh and complete. One afternoon, Edith's sister arrived at Nicholas's office looking mortified. I was there reviewing final trial preparations. They asked me to bring this. She handed over an envelope like it burned her fingers. I told them it was pointless, but they're family. "Read it for me," I said. She opened it reluctantly. "We offer $100,000 in exchange for dropping all charges. We acknowledge mistakes and seek resolution." Mistakes. I repeated the word slowly. "They call attempted murder mistakes." Her voice dropped to almost a whisper. "I don't recognize my sister anymore." I pulled out a pen, wrote directly on their offer. Single sentence in my teacher-perfect handwriting: "Justice is not for sale. See you in court." I handed it back unsigned. "They won't accept this," she said. "They'll be devastated." Good. They should be. Devastation is appropriate response to attempted murder and betrayal. I met her eyes. "Tell them the only settlement I'll accept is the one the judge pronounces." Over the following days, former neighbors who'd initially testified for Christopher, the 3 who'd accepted payment, contacted Nicholas requesting to change testimony. They'd learned the full truth, felt manipulated, wanted to correct the record. I watched these meetings, saw their shame, offered no comfort, but accepted their truth. Justice required accurate testimony, not punishing confused witnesses. One recanting witness, an elderly man who'd taken $500, looked directly at me. "Christopher said you'd approved everything, that signatures were just formalities. I needed the money. My rent was late. But then I learned what they really tried to do. Murder isn't helping with paperwork." "Then tell the truth," I said. "Completely. That's all I ask." The trial date approached. Christopher's employer, after workplace collection visits, put him on probation. Edith's medical board hearing was scheduled for September. Professional license revocation likely. Their marriage was toxic waste, corrosive to everything it touched. I stood in my bedroom one evening looking at the calendar. trial date circled in red. 3 days away. I'd laid out courtroom clothing, pressed suit, conservative tie, polished shoes, teacher preparing for important lecture. Phone rang. Nicholas. Final witness prep tomorrow morning. Then we're ready. I'll be there, I confirmed. After hanging up, I looked around my quiet house. For the first time in months, I felt peaceful, not happy. Peace and happiness are different things, but calm, certain. Justice delayed is not justice denied. I took out the old photo of young Christopher from my desk drawer, the one I'd put away weeks ago, looked at it one final time, the innocent child who became guilty adult. I wrote on the back, I gave you everything. You chose this path. I choose justice. Placed it in an envelope, sealed it, addressed it to Christopher for delivery after trial. Not cruel, just honest. Final communication between father and son. Then I went to bed, slept soundly for the first time in months. Preparation complete. Tomorrow, consequences arrive. The morning of trial arrived with sunrise just beginning to paint Orlando's sky. I woke early, dressed carefully in the suit I'd laid out the previous night. Tie knotted precisely, muscle memory from 40 years of professional dressing, shoes polished until they reflected light. Breakfast was simple, coffee, toast, routine maintained despite the day's significance. I reviewed nothing. Preparation was complete, evidence memorized, testimony ready. Nicholas picked me up at 8. We drove to the courthouse in comfortable silence, professionals prepared for performance. I watched morning traffic, ordinary people beginning ordinary days. Mine would be anything but ordinary, but necessary. Justice requires witnesses, requires public record, requires official pronouncement. The courtroom filled quickly. Media present. The case had attracted attention. Christopher and Edith sat with their attorney, looking diminished, defeated before verdict was announced. I sat behind the prosecution table, posture straight, calm. Judge entered. Everyone rose. The prosecutor's opening statement outlined the conspiracy clearly. Evidence will show defendants plotted to murder Francis Wilson for insurance money. They researched methods, obtained substances, created false documents, manipulated medical systems. Only intervention by alert flight attendant prevented this murder. Defense offered weak argument about family misunderstandings and poor communication. The jury's attention remained on the prosecution. Evidence presentation was systematic and devastating. Mildred's video played on courtroom screens. Her recording filled the room. Edith's voice unmistakable. Pills in his drink. Heart attack at altitude. 500,000. Christopher flinched hearing it. Edith stared straight ahead, jaw clenched. Mildred took the stand, voice shaking initially, but strengthening as she testified. I heard her clearly. She talked about heart attack, about altitude making it believable. She mentioned insurance money. I recorded it because I knew I had to have proof. Defense attempted cross-examination. Isn't it true you were in financial distress yourself? Mildred's response was firm. I didn't misinterpret murder. My financial situation is exactly why I understand desperation. But I didn't let it make me a killer. Forensic document examiner confirmed signature forgeries. Bank representatives detailed unauthorized transfers totaling $38,000. Dr. Patricia Chen testified to my full mental competency, destroying the incompetency claims entirely. Email evidence showed correspondence with medical consultant about lethal substances. Each piece built an irrefutable case. Then I took the stand. Oath administered, I settled into the witness chair. 40 years teaching had prepared me for public speaking, managing attention, delivering information clearly. When did you first suspect something was wrong? The prosecutor asked. The invitation to Miami was unusual, their sudden attention after months of distance. Small things that pattern recognition tells you matter. What did you do? What I taught students for 40 years: gather evidence, document everything, verify sources, build comprehensive case before drawing conclusions. I applied academic rigor to my own survival. Defense attorney's cross-examination was brief, ineffective. My credibility was unshakable, facts verified by overwhelming evidence. The jury deliberated less than 2 hours. When they returned, the foreman stood. On count 1, conspiracy to commit murder. guilty. Count 2, fraud, guilty. Count 3, forgery, guilty. Down the list. Each guilty hit Christopher and Edith visibly. Edith's composure finally cracked. Single tear, quickly wiped away. Christopher dropped his head into his hands. Sentencing phase arrived. Judge asked if I wished to make victim impact statement. I stood, faced Christopher and Edith directly. You lived in my house. I provided for you. I trusted you. You responded by plotting my death. I don't hate you. I pity you. You destroyed your lives for money you'll never see. That's justice enough. I sat. Judge nodded, appreciation for brevity and dignity. Sentences: Christopher received 3 years probation with strict conditions. Edith 5 years, longer due to professional credential abuse. Both ordered to repay $38,000 stolen funds plus $50,000 punitive damages. Permanent restraining order. All inheritance rights permanently revoked. Criminal records permanent. Judge's statement was clear. This case represents calculated, systematic betrayal of familial trust. Your victim's mercy in requesting probation rather than imprisonment is more than you deserve. Court adjourned. Outside on courthouse steps, media waited. I gave brief statement. Justice has been served. I hope this case reminds families that trust is sacred and betrayal carries consequences. I declined further questions, walked toward the parking garage, saw Christopher one final time, exiting through side door, head down, avoiding cameras. Our eyes met briefly. He looked away first. I felt nothing. Not anger, not satisfaction, not even sadness anymore. Just completion. Chapter closed. Nicholas drove me home. We rode in silence, comfortable and complete. As we pulled into my driveway, he extended his hand. You did good, Francis. Real good. We did, I corrected. Thank you. Inside my house, I stood in the quiet hallway. House was mine again, legally, physically, emotionally. I walked to my study, saw the timeline board I'd created weeks ago, covered with evidence documentation. Carefully, methodically, I began taking it down. Each photo, each document removed and filed. The conspiracy existed, justice was delivered, but I wouldn't live surrounded by reminders of betrayal. I placed all documentation in a banker's box, labeled it Christopher, case closed, August 2025. Stored it in the closet, not forgotten, but archived. Then I sat at my desk, opened my laptop, composed an email to the local high school principal. I'm a retired history teacher with 40 years experience. I'd like to volunteer, teaching 2 afternoons weekly, no compensation needed. I have stories worth telling, lessons worth sharing. Students should know that knowledge protects, documentation matters, and justice, though slow, arrives for those patient enough to pursue it properly. I hit send, closed the laptop, looked around my study, books I'd collected, papers I'd graded, life I'd built. Everything intact despite Christopher and Edith's attempts to destroy it. I smiled slightly, first genuine smile in months. Not because I was happy. Happiness would take time, but because I was free. Justice delivered, conscience clear, future unwritten. Tomorrow I would begin again. The past was archived where it belonged. Today I was just a teacher with lessons to share and a life to live. That was enough. That was everything. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.